Melissa Harrison's elegant apartment was nestled in a corner of Brooklyn Heights, one of America's prestigious neighborhoods. From her windows, she could see the Manhattan skyline, and at dusk, the setting sun over the Hudson River bathed her room in golden light. On this day, Melissa stood by the window, gazing at the distant view while listening to a voicemail from her mother. "Melissa, I need to talk to you about Caitlin's wedding. Please call me back as soon as possible. It's important." Melissa sighed deeply. She was one of New York's most successful accountants. As a financial advisor for major corporations, her accuracy and integrity had earned her a solid reputation in the industry. However, her sound judgment and composure somehow seemed to fade away when she was with her family. As she put down the phone and headed to the kitchen, Melissa reflected on her life. It had been 10 years since her father, Jonathan, had died suddenly from a heart attack. Her father had deeply loved his family and especially trusted Melissa. She had been entrusted with managing most of his estate, which cast a shadow on the family's complex dynamics. While placing her coffee cup on the kitchen counter, Melissa picked up her smartphone and opened Caitlin's Instagram. Her sister's latest post featured an enormous diamond engagement ring. Melissa smiled slightly. Caitlin was vain and extravagant. She always dressed in the latest fashions and constantly sought attention at social gatherings. On the surface, she was charming and especially popular with men, but underneath, she harbored complicated feelings toward her sister. "Melissa only thinks about work. She's not interested in romance at all," Caitlin would tell her friends. In reality, however, Melissa wasn't just busy with work, she was hesitant about relationships because a past heartbreak had left her traumatized. Looking at the family photo on the dining table, she saw her mother Eleanor's smiling face. Her mother was actively involved with the local arts society. But Melissa knew the calculating nature hidden behind her mother's smile. Eleanor always favored her younger daughter and tended to use Melissa as the reliable daughter. "You'll be fine because you're smart," was her mother's favorite phrase. It sounded less like praise and more like an excuse to burden Melissa with responsibilities. Melissa had recently opened a special account for her mother's future care expenses and deposited a substantial amount every month. Her mother hadn't saved enough for her own retirement. Melissa took a sip of coffee and thought calmly. It wasn't bad that her mother and sister relied on her. However, sometimes she was tormented by the feeling of being used rather than loved by her family. The phone rang, and the display showed Caitlin. Melissa hesitated for a moment but quickly answered. "Melissa. Are you busy? I have something important to tell you." Her sister's voice was high with excitement. "I just finished work." "What's going on? Did you know Brad's papa has a lovely vacation home in Newport? We've decided to have our wedding there." Caitlin continued breathlessly. "But there's one problem. Have you talked to Mom?" Melissa sat down on the sofa and rubbed her tired eyes. "I heard her voicemail, but I haven't called her back yet." "I see. Then I'll tell you." Caitlin's voice became slightly calmer. "It's about the wedding budget, and I need a little help." As Melissa gazed at the night view outside her window, she anticipated what was coming. Once again, she would have to tap into her savings in the name of family obligation. Yet, as always, she was torn between her desire to cherish her family and the need to protect herself. $50,000? "You've got to be kidding me," Melissa said, resting her elbows on the kitchen island counter and pressing her hand against her forehead. "Caitlin, that's most of my savings." In Melissa's home kitchen, 3 women faced each other. Spring sunlight streamed through the windows, casting golden streaks on the coffee cups placed on the table. "Melissa, that's what family is for," Eleanor said in a calm voice. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her cashmere sweater accentuated her good posture. "Your father would say the same thing if he were alive." Melissa silently absorbed her mother's words. Whenever her father's name came up, she felt a pain deep in her chest. "This is my only wedding," Caitlin said, her eyes welling up with tears. Her designer blouse was deliberately slipping off her shoulder. "You have a career, a beautiful apartment, and money. I have nothing." Melissa gazed out the window. Caitlin's claim of having nothing rang hollow. Her sister worked at a high-end boutique and lived surrounded by luxury brands. Her fiancé, Brad Smith, was a promising young investment banker. Their wedding was certain to be the talk of society. Brad's family agreed to cover half of the total cost, Caitlin continued. For the other half, please, Melissa. This is the most important day of my life. Melissa sighed. Words of refusal rose to her throat, but she swallowed them when she saw the expectant expressions on her mother's and sister's faces. All right, she said quietly. But I want to be involved in the wedding preparations. The schedule and venue decisions too. Of course. Caitlin jumped up with joy and hugged Melissa. The sweet scent of her perfume was overwhelming. I'll consult you on everything. But that promise was never kept. Over the next few weeks, Melissa heard nothing from Caitlin about the wedding preparations. She tried to contact her several times, but her sister cut the conversation short with a single word, busy. Eleanor advised her, don't pressure Caitlin. At the end of May, Melissa withdrew $50,000 from her special account and transferred it to Caitlin's account. That night, she finally received detailed information from her sister. June 25, Saturday, starting at 4 p.m. At the Ocean View Grand Hotel in Newport. Formal attire, please. What about the invitation? Melissa asked, and Caitlin laughed. Your family. You don't need an invitation, do you? Anyway, note the place and time. You're not a bridesmaid, so come to the venue on your own on the day. Melissa couldn't hide her surprise. I'm not a bridesmaid? Sorry. But I chose my friends. You're always so busy, I didn't want to impose. Caitlin's voice carried a hint of satisfaction rather than apology. On the wedding day, Melissa dressed in a high-quality gown with her hair styled in an updo. Though she usually wore natural makeup, she applied it more carefully for this special occasion. As a sister, she wanted to celebrate her younger sister's special day. The Ocean View Grand Hotel was a historic luxury hotel along the Newport coast. When Melissa stepped out of the taxi, the white building gleamed in the setting sun. However, there were no wedding decorations at the main entrance, and few people were around. Where is the Harrison Smith wedding being held? She asked at the front desk, and the young female staff member looked puzzled. One moment, let me check. She operated the computer and after a while, shook her head. The wedding concluded yesterday. It was on Friday, June 24th, starting at 2 p.m. Melissa felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. I was told June 25th, today. I'm sorry, but that's what the system shows. It was yesterday's event. With disbelief, Melissa took out her smartphone with trembling hands and called Caitlin. On the third ring, her sister answered. Background noises could be heard. Melissa? What's wrong? Caitlin's voice was high-pitched. I'm at the hotel, but they told me the wedding was yesterday. Melissa's voice trembled as she tried to control her emotions. After a moment of silence, Caitlin's laughter came through. Oh, that's right. It's already over. Thanks for being our ATM. Excuse me. Melissa couldn't believe her ears. Just kidding, Caitlin said with a laugh, but there was malice in her voice. Sorry, I must have given you the wrong date. We're on a cruise ship now for our honeymoon. We're having a party. After hanging up, Melissa's mind went blank. She collapsed onto a sofa in the hotel lobby and called her mother. Melissa, what's wrong? Eleanor's voice was calm. Mom, was Caitlin's wedding yesterday? Oh, didn't you know? There was a change in schedule. I thought Caitlin would tell you. Eleanor's voice sounded more like she was making excuses than expressing surprise. Why didn't you tell me? We can't accommodate someone as busy as you, Eleanor said coldly. Besides, contributing to the family is natural, isn't it? Your role was to provide the money. Melissa hung up and called a taxi. On the way home, still in her expensive dress, she quietly shed tears. Her heart was filled with sadness and anger at the betrayal. When she arrived home, Melissa found an invitation placed on her doormat. Opening it, she saw, "The wedding of Caitlin Harrison and Brad Smith, June 24th, printed inside. Yesterday's date. So it was planned, she whispered. That night, Melissa cried for a long time. But as her tears dried, a look of determination appeared in her eyes. She opened her computer and began reviewing files, records of financial transactions with her family, suspicious histories of her sister's credit card use, and recordings of conversations with her mother. The words, "That's what family is for," repeated in her head. Yes, because we're family, Melissa quietly replied. And that's why this ends now. The next morning, Melissa woke up earlier than usual. The light streaming through the window announced the beginning of a new day. She had overcome the previous night's sadness and anger and regained her composure. Dressed in a sophisticated pantsuit, she had returned to her confident accountant self. Looking out at the Manhattan skyline, she smiled quietly. It's a beautiful morning, she said to herself. That morning, Melissa visited the Jonathan Price law firm. Martin Cohen, the lawyer, had been the family's legal advisor since her father's time. He greeted Melissa with a warm smile. It's been a long time, Ms. Harrison. I haven't seen you since your father passed away, he said as they shook hands. I'm sorry to meet under these circumstances, Melissa replied as she sat down. She placed a folder of documents she had prepared since last night on the table. Taking a sip of coffee, she began explaining in a calm voice. She detailed her interactions with her mother and sister over the past few years, the wedding funding and betrayal, and evidence that Caitlin had used her credit card information for unauthorized purchases. Martin occasionally took notes while listening attentively. When Melissa finished speaking, he removed his glasses and sighed deeply. To be honest, this isn't just a family misunderstanding, these are legally problematic actions, he said quietly. Especially the credit card misuse is serious. Do you intend to report this to the police? Melissa looked out the window. No, not at that stage yet. First, I want to issue a formal warning and clarify my position. 2 hours later, Melissa had signed 3 documents. The first was a warning letter to her sister regarding the fraudulent acquisition of wedding funds, demanding repayment. The second was a notice to her mother, documenting evidence of unauthorized purchases using Melissa's name and the possibility of legal action. The third was a notice terminating the informal agreement in which Melissa had planned to cover all her mother's future care expenses. Please send them with delivery confirmation, Melissa told the lawyer's secretary. I want them to arrive by tomorrow morning. Before leaving the office, Martin placed his hand on her shoulder. Your father would be proud of your courage. Melissa smiled and quietly replied, Thank you. This is the end. That night, Melissa attended a yoga class and enjoyed a long bath. She felt the burden in her heart lighten a little. Before going to bed, she checked her cell phone and found 3 unread messages from Caitlin. Back from honeymoon. I have beautiful photos, want to see. Melissa, why aren't you responding? Are you still angry? I didn't know you couldn't take a joke. You're an adult now, don't take it so seriously. Melissa didn't reply, set her phone to silent mode, and placed it by her pillow. The next morning, she woke up with a peaceful mind. However, that peace didn't last long. When she turned off the silent mode on her phone in the afternoon, she saw dozens of missed calls and over 20 text messages. 7 calls from her mother, 12 from Caitlin. The message content evolved from, call me immediately, to, why are you doing this? I can't believe you got a lawyer, and we're family in increasingly hysterical tones. The most recent message was from her mother. Melissa and Harrison, call me right now. I didn't raise you to take family matters to outsiders. Melissa took a sip of coffee and checked her email from the lawyer. According to Martin, both Eleanor and Caitlin had contacted him, requesting a meeting. A lunch meeting at a Friday market, an upscale restaurant, had been proposed. Melissa replied, a neutral location would be better, and suggested meeting at the law office. Martin quickly responded, confirming a meeting at the office the following day at 2 p.m. The next day, when Melissa arrived at the law office, her mother, sister, and brother-in-law Brad were already waiting. Eleanor wore an expensive tweed suit and maintained her usual elegant posture, but the dark circles under her eyes revealed her anxiety. Caitlin wore a designer dress but looked unwell. Brad wore an unpleasant expression, staring out the window. Melissa, Eleanor rose and tried to approach her daughter, but Martin quietly urged her to return to her seat. As they sat at the conference table, Martin conducted the meeting. He first explained the legal situation and clearly stated Melissa's demands. Ms. Harrison is seeking the following: first, full reimbursement of the $50,000 paid for wedding expenses. Second, reimbursement of $15,000 for unauthorized credit card use. Third, renegotiation of future care expenses for her mother. After the explanation, Caitlin was the first to speak. Her voice was shaking, lacking her usual confident tone. Melissa, this is all a misunderstanding. The date change was a last-minute decision, and there wasn't time to notify you. And what I said was just meant to be a joke. The ATM comment was just humor. Melissa responded calmly, the invitations were printed 3 weeks in advance. I know because one was left at my front door. The date change was deliberate. Caitlin's face reddened. Beside her, Brad shifted uncomfortably. What about the credit card issue? Martin asked. That was... As Caitlin stumbled over her words, Eleanor interrupted. I did it. With all the wedding expenses for Caitlin, I used your information. I thought you wouldn't notice. Melissa, resorting to legal measures when we're family. Melissa looked straight into her mother's eyes. You're the one who saw family only as an ATM. You have no right to use money I earned on my own without permission. Silence filled the room. Brad cleared his throat and spoke for the first time. Is there a way to resolve this issue? We're newlyweds and want to avoid going to court. Martin looked through the documents before answering. Of course, there's a solution. Comply with Melissa's demands. After 3 hours of discussion, a final agreement was reached. Caitlin and Brad would repay the full wedding expenses in installments within 6 months, Eleanor would be responsible for repaying the $15,000 from unauthorized use, and future care expenses for their mother would be equally shared between Melissa and Caitlin. We reserve the right to take legal action if these conditions are violated, Martin stated finally. After everyone signed the agreement, the atmosphere in the room lightened slightly. Eleanor approached Melissa and said in a low voice. I didn't know you were such a strong girl. Melissa didn't smile. Mom, I've always been strong. You just never chose to see it. As they left the office, Caitlin also spoke to her. Melissa, I'm really sorry. I thought it would work out, you know. What did you think would work out? Using me and then mocking me? Melissa's voice was cold. That's not what I meant. Caitlin's voice grew small. Can we ever go back to being proper sisters again? Melissa paused for a moment and looked at her sister. Time will tell. But for now, I need distance. As she climbed into a taxi, Melissa took a deep breath. She wasn't sure if this was a new beginning or an ending. 2 weeks passed. Melissa immersed herself in work, trying to sort out her feelings. Her accounting firm's office was on the 20th floor of a Manhattan high-rise, with large windows that allowed her to feel the city's heartbeat. That afternoon, Melissa was reviewing a financial report for a major food company. Time spent focused on analyzing numbers was like a form of meditation for her. While engrossed in calculations, her secretary Jennifer knocked on the door. Melissa, you have a visitor, Jennifer said with slight confusion. It's Eleanor Harrison. Melissa stopped, surprised. It was extremely rare for her mother to visit the office. Please show her in, she responded, maintaining her composure. The door opened, and Eleanor entered. Her usual elegance was intact, but her expression showed anxiety and fatigue. She held a small paper bag. Melissa, Eleanor said quietly. I'm sorry to intrude, but I'd like to talk. Please, sit down, Melissa indicated the seating area by the window. Coffee? Thank you, I'd love some. After the secretary brought coffee, the two women sat facing each other. Outside the window, clouds drifted by. Eleanor picked up the coffee cup but stared at it without drinking. Melissa, let me apologize first, she said in an unexpectedly sincere tone. I hurt you. What Caitlin and I did was unforgivable. Melissa observed her mother silently. Tears glistened in Eleanor's eyes. Why? Melissa asked simply. Eleanor exhaled deeply. While looking for reasons, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. She took an old album from the paper bag. I found this. Opening the album, there were pictures of Melissa as a child. Her 7th birthday party, elementary school graduation, a high school debate team awards ceremony. Melissa was always smiling in the photos, but there was a thoughtful shadow in her profile. You were always a good child, Eleanor pointed to a photo. You always accomplished things on your own, never complained. Caitlin was different. She always needed help, always sought attention. So I was naturally left alone? Melissa's voice held bitterness. I made you feel that way, Eleanor said sadly. Actually, it was the opposite. You were strong, smart, and capable of anything, so I took you for granted. I thought your success was a given. Eleanor turned to the next page. There was a photo of Melissa graduating college with top honors. Beside her, her father Jonathan smiled proudly. Your father always trusted you. Melissa will be fine, she can do anything, he'd say. Eleanor's voice trembled. And I turned those words into a burden of responsibility. Mom. Melissa was at a loss for words. Caitlin had problems, so I became overprotective. Afraid of her failures, I always tried to shield her. But that ended up spoiling her. Eleanor wiped her eyes. I recognize my mistake in taking your strength for granted. A quiet moment passed. Melissa gazed out the window, confronting the complex emotions within her. The sadness and anger she had carried for so long were now surfacing. You know. Melissa began quietly. I was always expected to be the responsible child. Even more so after Dad died. But sometimes, I just wanted to be loved. Her voice trembled slightly. Just as a daughter, not as a support pillar. Tears fell from Eleanor's eyes. Melissa, I'm so sorry. Providing money wasn't the issue, Melissa continued. But being excluded from the wedding, being called an ATM, that was like denying my value. Yes, you're right, Eleanor admitted frankly. I should have stopped Caitlin's behavior. I should have taught her boundaries. What about Caitlin? Melissa asked. She's still unable to accept reality, Eleanor answered honestly. Brad is angry, and they're fighting about the repayment plan. But that's a problem they need to solve. Melissa reached for her coffee and took a sip. What do you want to do now, Mom? I want to get you back, Eleanor said straightforwardly. But I understand it will take time. We're the ones who lost your trust. The two sat for a long time without exchanging words. Twilight light streamed through the window, coloring the office gold. Finally, Melissa spoke. Complete reconciliation isn't possible right now, she said quietly. But perhaps we can build a new relationship. How? Eleanor asked sincerely. First, establish boundaries, Melissa answered calmly. My life, my decisions, my money, they're mine and not something to be used as a matter of course. Eleanor nodded slightly. And let's have dinner together once a week, Melissa suggested. At a neutral place. Getting to know each other again, as adults. That's wonderful, Eleanor's face showed relief. Finally, Melissa added with a serious expression, I can't consider repairing my relationship with Caitlin yet. Not until I feel she has truly changed. Eleanor nodded a bit sadly. I understand. She needs to realize this herself. That night, Melissa stood on her apartment balcony, looking up at the starry sky. Complex emotions filled her heart. Though she hadn't reached complete forgiveness, today's dialogue was a beginning of something. She picked up her father's photo and smiled quietly. Dad, I'm going to be fine. I know my own worth now. The next morning, when Melissa woke up, her heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. Though she hadn't completely let go of the past, she had definitely taken a step toward the future. She picked up her smartphone and turned off the alarm. A message from her mother was displayed on the screen. How about Thursday, 7 p.m., at Mitchell's restaurant? Melissa smiled and replied. Sounds good. I'll make the reservation. Exploring the possibility of a new relationship with her family while protecting her own worth was a big challenge for her. But she was no longer alone. She had become her own greatest ally. A year can seem both long and short, can't it? Melissa said to the man walking beside her as they strolled along a Central Park pathway. Spring sunshine filtered through the trees, and fresh green leaves swayed in the gentle breeze. Especially if it's been a fulfilling year, Michael Collins smiled in response. He was a 42-year-old lawyer who worked in the legal department of a company where Melissa served as an advisor. They had been dating for 8 months. Yes, Melissa nodded with satisfaction. Life takes unexpected directions. A year had passed since that wedding incident. Melissa's life had changed significantly. While continuing her work, she had learned to value her own time. On weekends, she attended yoga classes, participated in a book club, and resumed her long-neglected hobby of photography. Her relationship with her mother was gradually being repaired. They continued their weekly dinners as promised, building a relationship of mutual respect as adults. Though not perfect, it was much healthier than before. Would you like to join me for dinner with my mother on Thursday? Melissa asked, holding Michael's hand. Of course, he answered sincerely. Michael knew about the complex history of Melissa's family. He respected her feelings and was always a supportive presence. On their way to a cafe in the center of the park, Melissa's smartphone rang. Looking at the screen, she saw her sister's name. After a slight hesitation, she answered. Caitlin. Melissa, can we talk? Her sister's voice lacked its former arrogance and sounded tired. I'm in the park right now. Did something happen? Brad left, Caitlin's voice trembled. He's asking for a divorce. Melissa stopped walking and nodded slightly to Michael, indicating she needed a moment to talk privately. What happened? What's going on? Everything is falling apart, Caitlin sobbed. The wedding debt is still there, my credit score is terrible, and my friends are distancing themselves. Melissa listened quietly. Hearing about her sister's life collapsing didn't bring her joy. Rather, complex emotions crossed her heart. Is there anything I can help with? She asked gently. But her tone indicated clear boundaries. Could you lend me some money? Caitlin's voice became small. I can't do that, Melissa answered firmly. But if you truly want to change, I can refer you to a financial planner. After a silence, Caitlin sighed. I understand, thank you. After hanging up, Melissa returned to Michael. Seeing her expression, he put his arm around her shoulders without saying anything. Are you okay? Yes, Melissa smiled. Before, I would have rushed to help immediately. But now, I've learned to value myself. Sitting at a terrace table in the cafe, basking in the spring sunshine, Melissa gazed at the distant skyscrapers. Life is never perfect, but the peace of mind she found by living true to herself was priceless. Cheers, Michael raised his coffee cup. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, Melissa clinked her cup with his, smiling. She had now become the protagonist of her own story. No longer living solely to meet someone else's expectations or demands, she was walking through life with her own choices. It might sometimes be a lonely or difficult path. But it was certainly her own path. And that was enough.